It's without a doubt that this movie is one of the most beautiful and visually stunning movies of all time. You know, animation movies has been around for, 100 plus years, but not to the extent and the impact this movie is creating for this world. So why is that, right? Even though it's been super innovative with its visual design, its cinematography, but at the same time, this movie sticks to a lot of the core principles of cinematography and VFX and animation. And today in this video, I want to break that down and show you guys how you can use it to make your short films and your animations to the next level. And it's always sticking to these core principles. And today's video is actually a little different. It's not just me. This video, I'm going to be bringing in a cinematographer, a visual effects artist, and an animation storyboard artist as well.
I remember being really impressed with this film when it came out. The story is super gripping and emotional, and the animation is something that I've never seen before. Obviously, I know you want to talk about the cinematography and how that kind of like translates into this animation world, and all the principles are definitely there.
So cinematography, what makes up the principles of cinematography? Well, I think whether it is in animation or live action, these three principles always apply. Number one, I think this is one of the most important and fundamental ones. It's lighting. The way this film shapes light is very similar to the ways live action films shape light. So looking through the credits of this movie, there are no cinematographers, but all of these visual artists are using these techniques of lighting to create this atmosphere, this cinematic feeling to it. The way they use far side lighting, 3-point lighting, even though it's not the same as actually putting on the lights, right? But it's creating the same feeling as you would do it in a live action. So just remember, placement of lighting is so important. Almost always have the light on other side of your actors, especially if it's outside, right? Right now, I'm placing the sun behind me because it creates separation, it creates depth, and that's what light is for, to create this setting, amplifies your actors, making them pop out of the environment.
In this shot in particular, the light definitely adds depth to the image. You see the main character in his red and blue Spider-Man outfit, and that clearly establishes him. And other than that little mailbox and the red taillights of that car, there isn't a whole lot of red and blue in the image, so your eye instantly goes to him, and he's moving, and we're following him, so obviously that's going to get the audience's attention.
This is a wide shot that shows his loneliness, his out of place, and they do that with a lot of things. They do that by contrasting the color of Miles' costume with the background and blurring everything out. This wide shot is a lot about isolation.
So number two, I think it's composition. The way you frame your actors within the environment, the way you put them to convey a certain meaning, right? And you can see they're very intentional with their choices. And I think this is really important. You have to make sure every choice of lighting or composition, it's intentional for the story. It's not just to make it look good, it makes the story better.
You have a lot of different art styles and a lot of different creative choices that go into everything, but they all ultimately serve to help establish the setting and establish the characters. You could take, for example, in Spider-Gwen's world, when she's confronting her dad, you'll notice that the background will change colors and different patterns and stuff will appear to reflect the emotions of the conversation. Something else would be Spider-Punk's art style, where while the other characters are animated on 1s and 2s, he's animated on 3s, his guitar is animated on 4s, he always looks like he's cut out of paper, and sometimes he'll be black and white, sometimes he won't be, sort of to push forward the character's idea that he doesn't value consistency and that he goes against the norm.
In this film, you can see the way they put the characters through all these different fights. There's scenes where there's so many different things happening at the same time, but your eyes always are drawn to the main character because of composition and movements.
So this is a very specific thing that I want to talk about, where during the action scenes, the camera stays on these very still frames. There's, it's in the center, and Spider-Verse is great at having these wide shots. See, they're staying very still, the fight is focused. The fight is focused on him because the frame is still, mostly. Even here, it's focus on focus, these very still shots to contrast how fast they're moving. Yeah, there, even that moment as the camera tracks him, it goes from being him in control, following him, and he goes a little bit out, and for a moment he's out of control, and then he's right back into it. I think the colors are what draw your focus in this movie like 50-60% of the time, just because of how vivid they are. This is a very commonly used shot that I don't see very much in live action that animation uses so beautifully.
The next thing I want to talk about is camera movements. So I think in this film, it's different than a lot of live action, and this is the key, is because it's able to achieve a lot of camera angles that are impossible to do in live action, or at least right now, but they are able to make it still look natural. And the scenes where they're fighting, swinging across the different buildings, and there's tons of different characters everywhere, it's very dynamic, kind of like draws you into the character, right? And all these different camera movements follows Miles Morales through New York City, through the different worlds and dimensions, seeing him fight the different characters. And it's really cool to have it where they don't keep cutting, because in live action it's harder to make these dynamic movements, therefore they resort to a lot of fast-paced cutting. But in this film they don't, because they don't need to, right? They have ultimate control over literally every single aspect. It's really cool to see what they're doing with the movements.
It feels like we're watching someone jump off in the camera. Like, movement down, I think, works really effectively. You can feel this glow from all the neon lights. And I noticed that when the camera tilts up a little bit, there's like an anamorphic lens flare that happens in the animation. I mean, looking at these clips and seeing the camera movement, paying attention to that specifically, I also noticed that I think it just resembles a live action camera if it was being recorded live action. I think in live action, you gotta mask a lot of things and cut it away immediately. With this animation, we're able to kind of sink into this world of animation.
They have a lot of really unique and dynamic camera angles and movements that sort of really embody the idea of Spider-Man. I've been a Spider-Man fan my whole life, and I feel like in every live action iteration, there's always something missing. Something about, I think, the way the characters move or the way the camera moves just doesn't quite feel real. It doesn't feel dynamic enough. And I think that's something this movie did so perfectly. You'll notice that some scenes where Miles is just in normal everyday clothes, he's still moving, and there's these awesome one takes where he's like climbing through hallways and he's like putting on his suit in his room that just feels so Spider-Man-like. It feels like a comic book come to life.
This is all of the right principles of cinematography shown in the shot right here. Like you said, backlighting, subject adds a ton of depth, and that's what's happening here. And it's also kind of distinguishing the different layers of the shot. The darkest parts of shadow are in the foreground, and the brightest parts are in the background in that back wall layer. And then we have this mid-ground-ish area that's also very evenly lit where that painting and the wall is. And it's kind of like, in a way, adding to that suspense of, our eye somehow like draws to this area, what's going to happen in that. And then, of course, all those Spider-Men burst in. This sequence right here is one of my favorite from the movie because of how standard this coverage is of this two-person dialogue scene. Yet they're sitting upside down on the top of a skyscraper. It captures a standard-looking two-person dialogue scene in a very different looking background that I think just really grabs your attention.
And this brings us to another tip I want you guys to keep in mind with your camera movements in your short films. Camera movements should be used when it's necessary, because as you can see, even though they have absolute control over pretty much every aspect of the camera movements, they still don't use it for every single scene, and that's because not every single scene or camera angle needs it. There's a lot of still shots, just like in regular live action movies. So just make sure you're using it when you need to. Have it be motivated by either a character walking, running. Be motivated. Everything should be intentional, like I keep referring to. Just never do something just for the sake of it looking really good. And ultimately, the cinematography should not be taking away from the story, right? The cinematography should be elevating the story. What the story needs, the cinematography gives.
This shot, if you look at, they have all the buildings set up in a way that's terribly stretched, curved in so that the camera gets the right angle to have this beautiful curving right there. And this shot is also metaphorical. He's rising up. I mean, this may be more of a choreography thing, but from this point on, from the moment that he swings up with the music, he just keeps rising. I mean, he just goes up and up and up and up, and it really builds the tension there. And that's still pretty much up until it all stops. Until it all stops there. go see this movie. Go see the movie, please. It's amazing.
Some major takeaways that I take away from watching something like this are how well they use layers, whether that's foreground and background, and color to distinguish the subject. And they also really use lighting. Even though it's animated, lighting is also used just like it is in live action, where all the light has motivation and also helps with that distinction between foreground and background and midground. Obviously, the compositions and the color all do something to make the audience feel a certain way, and I think it works really well in multiple parts of the film. Those are some of many things to take away from these two awesome films.
I think something audiences can really take away is, number one, absolutely just enjoy the ride. But if there's anything to learn, it's that there really is like a beauty in having all this chaos, having all this crazy energy, and more importantly, doing it with intention, doing it in places where you know it'll hit, understanding that every part of that movie, every little thing you see was an intentional decision of somebody who worked on it. And I guess you can really appreciate the movie even more for that.
I think another cool piece of advice is to find people that are also very passionate about filmmaking to help you. I mean, without people like them, I wouldn't have been able to bring in these three amazing guests in today's video, right? And a really great way of finding these people are to connecting with them on Instagram, reaching out, right? Asking a friend of a friend, just sending a DM. And another really great way to build this community is by going to film school. I'm a student at USC School of Cinematic Arts, and I've been able to have a really great time building a community there. And if you guys want to know what it's like to go to film school, and check out this video right here. Well, I hope you guys the best on your future filmmaking endeavors, and I hope you guys are able to learn a lot from this movie to apply these cinematic techniques in your next film. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.